Hello, everybody. Welcome to the seventh episode of Press and Pins. Thank you guys for joining me again for a podcast episode that I'm really excited about. My week really hasn't been too much. I had a lot of revelations this week, and I'm really excited for the month to be over. I am counting down the days. I am ready for the month to be over, for July to start. It's been a very interesting first 6 months of the year for me personally, work-wise, just coming to a lot of conclusions and epiphanies that I'm just like getting the same lesson over and over and over again. And I'm like, okay, I get it now. So let's go ahead and get into this week's podcast. Please make sure that you leave a review. We would love a 5-star review. Ain't too proud to beg. I would love that. So please make sure you leave reviews and you tell a friend to tell a friend to tell another friend, and just share the podcast. If you feel like you can't leave a review, even though it's free and it costs you nothing, then just tell a friend to listen to our podcast. And we will now be getting into the first episode, the seventh episode, first segment, which is textile tea. So actually, earlier this month, I totally missed this, but earlier this month, the Business and Human Rights Source Center created a new online portal, which makes it very easy for everybody to be able to look up and go through what a company stands for, or even their issues that they've been having. So it's really simple. All you do is pull out your phone, you go to the Business of Human Rights, business-humanrights.org. Simply click go, and then you'll see a button that says Find Companies. So we click on our Find Companies, and the great thing about this portal is that it offers you different segments. So you have clothing, you have hotels, you have technology. So we are going to go with clothing for the first one, and we will do Aritzia because I have been seeing Aritzia on my TL for the longest. Of course, we all know what Aritzia is, a fast fashion brand that I really want to say just became popular over here this year, maybe within the last 3 years, not this year in particular. So anyway, you go to their page, you click them, and then you look at their resource center. So right now they don't have any responses. They don't have any response requests. And then what I really love about this is if you go down to the bottom, it says associated top issues. So these are the issues that are going to be associated with that brand. So for Aritzia, we have labor rights, we have supply chain issues, and we also have forced labor or modern slavery. And it also gives you some of their benchmarks, so their transparency index and where they've been over the last couple of years. And they don't, let's do somebody else because they don't. Let's do Balenciaga. Last episode we talked about how luxury brands are starting to carry themselves as a luxury fashion brand. Once again, they have no responses, but their associated top issues are again going to be labor rights, sanctions, gender discrimination, climate crises, and women. I was exploring this earlier and I found one that even had like articles linked to it, but they have so many brands on here, from Dillard's to Doc Marten to Famous Footwear to Fendi. Like, you can scroll and scroll and scroll, and they have so many people. Actually, let's look at the technology one. Let's go to Apple. So we're going to Apple, and so for them, they have 24 response requests, 20% response rate. They have a lawsuit profile. They have allegations. Some of their top issues are, once again, supply chain, labor rights, personal health, clean, healthy, and sustainable environments, and right to privacy. They have a lot of benchmarks as well. So it is a really great resource to use if you are interested in what this brand stands for, what they have going on, or what they are doing. So I definitely recommend checking them out. And now we are going to go ahead and move on to our party fashion notes. It has been a sad but exciting week in the fashion industry. I'm going to take a quick drink of water and then we're going to get into it. So, for party fashion notes this week, we started off the week with a surprise drop from Alessandro Michele who is now once was the creative director of Gucci, but he is now the creative director of Valentino. And this man randomly drops over 200 looks of Valentino's latest collection. So I think they were scheduled to show during Paris Fashion Week. He was like, you know what? We're just going to drop. It was a very random drop. He has not been known for editing. He does not edit down those looks. So around 260 looks. It was really an emphasis on what I love about it is that you can still see his signature and how he sees the Valentino customer versus how he saw the Gucci customer. And when we compare it to Gucci, there's still similarities, right? But those similarities may just be him. Because people were like, oh, Valentino isn't even this retro, when they are. Valentino was once a fun collection. Maybe not as fun as Gucci would have been with the styling, but they still are a very fun collection. So I suggest that you check that out and you look at those looks. It was very accessories forward. We always see a lot of fun styling from him and how he's layering his pieces, which is also, when we look at these runway shows, styling is really important, which, side note from this, Black Excellence, let me forget his name, Wisdom actually styled Kid Super's fashion show too. And if you don't know who Wisdom is, he is a TikToker who his claim to fame was he would just say, okay, who's this anime character? And then he would dress like the anime character. And he puts together these looks. It's Winston Kanye. He's really good. I would suggest, if you know who he is, like when you see a picture of him, I think he just walked in, I think it was Harris Reed's collection. He walked last year for somebody, but you know him. If you see him, you know him. And then I'm not going to start with the sadness. And then A$AP Rocky, we see his launch of Era, which he launched that in Paris Fashion Week this week. And surprisingly enough, it was good. I'm not really a big fan of celebrity brands because I always feel like they are cash grabs at the end of the day. Like only select celebrities, I think, have brands that they truly care about and they're really passionate about. And a great example beyond fashion would be Jessica Alba and the Honest brand. That girl, that woman cares about that brand deeply. It's like $1 billion brand at this point. But brands like that. So I've never been a huge fan of celebrity brands, but I was like, when I heard about A$AP and AGOT, I was like, okay, let me check it out. And it was really good. It was actually a really good collection. I suggest everybody look into it. It was a good collection about how he views the American dream. It was really well styled. So his design team did that. I'm very proud of them. And then some other shows you should check out would of course be Loewe, J.W. Anderson, Rick Owens, Louis with Pharrell. Check all of those brands out. Last week, I gave you where to go to look at those. So let's just shout them out one more time. Vogue, Runway, and Now Fashion are going to be the top 2 places that you should probably look into all of your fashion and your runway looks. And then for the side, side news. Dres Van Noten premiered his last show as creative director this week with his Silver Brick Road. It was he has been it's his brand, of course, it's his namesake. He's been there since the beginning, and we're really sad to see him leave. So he's necessarily not going to be a part of the day to day, but he would still be advising the design team. And honestly, I think they just put that statement out for a transition plan. Like, that's the transition plan. He's just not going to be there day to day. He'll be there. The designers will call them if they need him, blah, blah, blah. But I think once they find another creative director, that's kind of going to go to the side. But he is retiring, and we're so sad to see him retiring because that brand is beautiful. So, and then next, which may not be big news in the parties that you go to, but it's something to think about and something to consider. Limited 2 tween fashion is coming back. And the reason that this is sticking out to me when I saw it and what I need people to start talking about is because Limited 2 went away because the tween girl was eliminated, right? We don't necessarily have that typical tween fashion girl like we normally had. She has been absolved, and she is now shopping where her big sister shops always. There really isn't any brand that's for teenagers, right? There's no brand for the teenage girl. That she doesn't have TV shows she could watch anymore. She's watching what grown people would watch. And what I mean by that would be when I was growing up, I had That So Raven. Sweet Life of Zach and Cody. You have True Jackson. You have The Amanda Bynes Show. You have Boy Meets World. You have Smart Guy would be one. Proud Family. There were so many shows that were for the tween girl or boy. They were for the tween person, right? I wasn't watching a reality dating show when I was a teenager. High School Musical is a perfect example. Like, that is a tween movie, and it was. I don't think right now we would be able to have a High School Musical because we don't necessarily have the tween customer anymore. Like, they weren't for adults, but they also weren't for like little kids. They were made with a teenage person in mind, and we don't have that anymore. We don't have that. So to see Limited 2 come back means that market may be reappearing, and that girl may be reappearing, and there's a need for it, right? Because nobody comes back. Nobody starts a business unless there is a need for it. There's a problem, there's a solution. So where she has once disappeared, maybe she's coming back. And maybe she now has space, and Limited 2 is trying to create that space for her. But we'll also see what designs they come out with, because if it's just adult designs just Forever 21, then okay, whatever. But when I remember Limited 2, it was the bright colors, it was doodles on the wall, it was stuff that just said cheer, that just said dance. It was, now that I think about that story, it was so loud and so obnoxious, but I loved it so much. Limited 2 and like Claire's was the place that I would just run into and just look at all their fun accessories. My mother never bought me anything. She never bought me any of those accessories because why would she? But the clothes, she was like, yeah, girl, we can get this. So that brand is coming back, which means that customer may be coming back. So I'm definitely interested to see where that goes. And then I should have said this when I spoke about ASAP, but Dior had named Rihanna the new face of J'adore, their fragrance line, which they will now be relaunching. If you remember those old commercials with Charlie Thornton and the bottle of perfume that had all of those gold rings on them, I really think they took that from African necklaces. Okay, I just thought about that for a second. But they had all those gold rings on them, and then got like a little circle at the top. It was a beautiful perfume glass. But Rihanna has been named the spokesperson for the door now, and that's the first time. She's the second one, because the first one was, like I said, Charlize Theron. They went away from them a little bit, and now they're coming back, and Rihanna will be their spokesperson. So we'll see what happens to them. And that is pretty much everything that happened within the fashion industry this week. Make sure that the next time you're at your parties this weekend, you're like, dolls, I know exactly what's going on, okay? All right, so now we're going to move on to the next segment, which is Thoughts of a Rejected Fashionista. Please make sure you send in any questions, creative problems, sewing problems, fashion problems, anything you have to press and A&D pins at info@fibers.com. So let me repeat that one more time. Press A&D pins at fibers.com. And that's fibers with 2 eyes. Let's get into this week's subject, which is going to be how to know if you're burnt out. A lot of people and a lot of creatives don't know that they are burnt out until they become burnt out, or until their body tells them. Your body can attack you, because your body takes, and that stress takes it, everything. So your body can attack you, or really until something goes awry and they're like, hold on, I may be a little burnt out. So let's go over 3, besides your feelings, because I will say this. If you feel like you're about to get burnt out, maybe you're burnt out already. Really trust, I cannot emphasize this enough. Trust your one instinct. 2, trust your body. Your body will tell you that you are heading toward a burnout before anything else will. Your body will tell you, your mind will tell you, please, take care of yourself, very first thing. But listen to your body. And if you even have to think, I may be burnt out, babes, you're headed there. So let's just calm down. So let's go over 3 ways that you can tell that you're heading towards a burnout. The very first one is you lose your passion. So if you entered something and you were very passionate about it, you love doing it, and now you look up and you're like, oh, hold on, I don't really like this anymore. I don't enjoy doing this anymore. This is a no for me. You may need to take a break from that, right? You can only sew for so long until you're like, actually, I don't think I like doing this anymore. And that's when you know, I may need to take a mental break. I may need to go on a, sabbatical. I may need to just go on a vacation, calm down, and chill out. Because your most creative ideas and your best ideas will always come from you just chilling. When you are doing the most random thing, which I was reading something. Well, no, I was listening to a podcast, and this guy was talking about why creatives procrastinate and why creatives, they procrastinate and they're not good at it. And he was saying that a lot of times creators do that because they know that inspiration can come at any minute. And what they get excited about, that's when it can happen. So they can be at the grocery store, minding their business, picking out groceries, and then the idea for something happens. So pushing it off and waiting and not starting so early and being a procrastinator was one of the telltale signs that he was dealing with a creative. He knew he was dealing with a creative. Because, like I said, it randomly comes. So if you feel like you are losing your passion with something, you may need to take a break. And it may be a break from the environment that you're working on. Because we all know sometimes people can help us lose our passion for something. Sometimes it's working for the wrong person. So when you lose your passion for something, there's a signal there. And you need to start getting to the root of that and getting to the bottom of it. And it may be a burnout. The second one is you're making simple mistakes. There's some things I can do with my eyes closed. There's some things that I just know how to do like the back of my hand. I don't have to think too much. I know 2 + 2 = 4, right? I know a fourth plus a fourth is a half. There's certain things that I just know for a fact. And when you start making simple mistakes, and your brain is a little bit foggy, it may be time. You probably are heading for a burnout and you need to take a break. It's that same thing as I know for a fact that I can't work too late. So my cutoff time for working is really around, I can't work past midnight on a sewing. And even a sewing, anything, I really can't do it past 11. Past 11, I'm bound to make a mistake somewhere. I'm bound to make a simple mistake. I have made so many simple mistakes by trying to sew so late. Or when I'm working on this project and I really, really want to get it done, at the very end, I make a stupid, simple mistake. There's a sign there. You may be heading towards a burnout. You may not be working during your right time. But if you're making simple mistakes, the result could be you being burnt out in a while. The third one is your life is imbalanced. So if you are focusing on one thing in particular and everything else starts going to the wayside, you may be heading towards a burnout because those other things matter, right? And eventually you're going to have to go and face those. So it may be time for you to take a break from the big project that you're doing or the big thing that you're doing. You may need to take a break from that. So those are the 3 signs that personally I know that I'm headed for. I'm headed for a burnout. But burnouts are very typical. Like, they're typical. Everybody goes through them, especially if you're a creative and we're working in a society that cares so much about being productive. I was talking to, I was working a show, and one of the women there was from the UK. Yeah, I want to say London, but I'm not for sure. So I was working the show. She's from the UK. I was in the wardrobe department, and she was in physical therapy because they have people come in when actors are like on their breaks, like they stress them out, blah, blah, blah. And she came up to me and she was like asking me about like my breaks, and we started talking. And then I started talking to her about like what she felt was so different about the UK versus the US, because she was over here for her master's and she was going to head back. And she was telling me about how Americans just don't rest, and she doesn't understand it. She was like, I don't get it. She was like, in the UK, we're always on holiday. Like, a company always gives you vacation days. Like, why are we fighting for this? She was like, you guys are so concerned about being productive and working that you miss out on life. And I agree with that completely. And then also, I feel like we're so worried about being productive that we do not understand that a burnout could happen, and a burnout may be around the corner. So always remember to take your breaks, babes. Take a break. Take a breather. Go do something that's fun. Go do something else. Remove yourself from your sewing machine some days, and just remember to go live life. Because not only will living life make you more creative, but it also prevents a burnout. Alright, let's get into our main topic of the day. And we will be starting this series called Design Decode, where I start to break down designs to you guys and things of that nature. And we're going to go decade by decade for this series. We're going to start by the 50s and we're going to make our way up to the early 2000s. And what we're going to talk about is how to identify each decade, the telltale signs of each decade, what was going on. So when we're looking at something that's not just grease, you understand the designs. And Design Decode will start now. Okay, so we will talk about the 50s, 1950s to be exact. And the 50s was about youth. It was about optimism. So what world events are going on right now? We just got done with World War II. So we have the Cold War looming over us, this nuclear threat looming over us. But with getting out of World War II, you have this optimism about life now, because there's certain technology advances that you have now that really help fashion move forward, which I've said before a lot of times, because fashion and technology go hand in hand. They do. Anytime technology changes, fashion changes too. Anytime worldly events happen, fashion is a direct reflection of that. So within the 50s, this is also, like I said, the youth is coming up. And this is also when a teenager begins to exist. Because believe it or not, before the 50s, a teenager was not a thing. The teenager word, the generation, that begins to appear. And that's why they say that the 50s was more about youth and optimism. So let's talk about, before we get into that, let's talk about some key events that happened within the 50s first. And then also, I want to say that when people talk about decades of fashion, you will see some of the past decade and the beginning of the next decade. So when people talk about, oh, my earring fell off. So when people talk about 50s fashion, they will always start with the late 40s. And that's because the late 40s, what happens in there affects the 50s. And that's when that style starts to pick up. It takes years for a style to pick up back in those times. Now it's a little bit different because we have TikTok, which the lifespan of a trend, of a fad, is completely different now. It's completely different because we have TikTok. But in the 50s, when we didn't have TikTok, we didn't have social media, you use a couple years before, a couple years after. So the 50s really, really, when we get down to it, it's like the 1947 to like 1963. That's when we start to see the 50s. So the first thing that happened in the 50s, Dior comes out with the first collection of the new look. It's not his first collection. He comes out with the collection of the new look, which we will talk about in a little bit. That's like in the 1947. Another thing that happens, which I think is very indicative of this timeline and this decade, is that in 1948, the Academy Awards presents a new category for costume design. So now costume designers can get recognized for the work that they've put in, which when I go over this timeline, you can see how that happens. So then we have rock and roll, that I'm using quotations because rock and roll was already a thing in other cultures, but rock and roll became mainstream. This is when we have a tween style come out. It's like teddy boys. It's like around 1851. Then we have The Rose was published, which inspires these beatniks. So let's think slim fitted, black clothes, beret. And then we have Audrey Hepburn, who continues to push this. In 52, we have Balenciaga that comes out with this sack dress, this sack wedding dress, which doesn't get picked up until the late 50s, because 52, it takes a time for things to pick up. Then we have Wild Ones, which was a movie, become popularized because of the blue jeans and leather jacket, which on this list, one way that you can forecast fashion is by looking at the movies that are going to come out that year. They're going to come out in that year, come out within the next 2 years. And then from that standpoint, we can start to predict some fashion. A great example would be Beyonce Cowboy Carter. That is a album, but with the announcement of that album, Doc Martens started to release cowboy boots. What? Like they started to release cowboy boots, and now we have this uptick in cowboy accessories. That's what I mean by forecasting and how you can use what you have going on. In the 50s, in the mid-50s, we have stilettos now become popular because of technology. So now they have the technology for a heel to be able to hold the pressure versus a wooden heel, right? That's different now. So now we have that technology come out. We have Bazaar that opens in London. Yves Saint Laurent, he does his first show after Dior passes away in like 1957, I think. Then we also have the first Barbie comes out to accommodate the tween customer that we now have, that now emerges out of the 50s. And then we also have Lycra, which is spandex and elastane, created. So in the 50s, well, the late 50s, we have Lycra, and then that fabric changes the way that we view sportswear. And then this is when JFK and Jackie become the president, first lady. So they are, of course, introduced as fashion icons. So now let's get into some of the designs that you should associate with the 50s. So the first thing is going to be the Dior New Look, which really pioneers the rest of the 50s and how we start to view the rest of the 50s, because what the New Look did is the New Look really emphasized a womanly, feminine figure. So when we think New Look, think round shoulders, tiny waist, padded hips with a full skirt. That's what the New Look looks like. So we have that. And that silhouette is the silhouette you need to know for the 50s, because it literally is everything. So this is also, like I said, this is after the war. So now we have leisure time. The middle class is starting to rise up. They're like, okay, hold on. What can we do with all this time now? We don't have rations anymore. We're like, this is what I mean by that optimism starts to happen. And we start to see the invention of cocktail dresses. That comes out in the 50s, because now people are having cocktail parties, which was not a thing before. So now we have cocktail dresses because the middle class is starting to come a little bit bigger. They have this leisure time. And what about cocktail dresses? Let's go back to the Dior New Look. Now, you will also see designers playing with long silhouettes, tight silhouettes. And you'll see that, I want to take a pin real fast. You'll see that in each decade, you'll see people playing with things that are a little bit outside of the box within that decade, but they're still decade signature things. And the New Look, tiny waist, full skirt is going to be the 50s. So that's what our cocktail dresses are. Tiny waist, full skirt. And they're formal. They're like mid-calf level. This is when we get our velvets and our brocades, and this is a more luxurious fabric. Another thing that is how you know you're in the 50s, let's look at the tailoring, women's tailoring. So a lot of times people associate women's tailoring with the 80s. And the 80s is when we get square and padded. We get the square shoulders, very padded. But in the 50s, go back to Dior, what we see are round shoulders. So we see a round shoulder, a tight waist, and then an emphasized skirt again, but it's a little bit different because that's just in the bodice. That's just in the jacket. So think peplum. It's just in the jacket. You have a peplum, and then it goes straight to a mini skirt. It can still be a full skirt, but most of our jackets are going to be peplum-like, and that's a surefire way to know that you are in the 50s, because once again, the key throughout all of these designs is they emphasize the ideal of a feminine form. That's how you know you're in the 50s. Because tailoring is going to be mid-30s, right? When I get to the men, we get into something that was already present. But the main thing is you're going to emphasize, I cannot emphasize this enough, it is the feminine form. That is what Dior, the New Look, started within the 50s. That's what he emphasized. So then this is also when, after World War II, people, let's go before World War II, people didn't look at coats the same way they did until after the military trench coat gets invented, which is in World War II. That's when the military trench coat becomes invented, and people are like, well, hold on. I like that, I can now wear a coat as an outfit. You know, this is when we start to see people with good coats. You know, do you see this coat? This is when the 50s is when you start to see that, right? So then also within the 50s, we go back to leisure, right? Women no longer are thrusted forward because their man left. So they can go back to the house. They can chill out in the house. And this is when we have the signature 50 housewife, who's just happy to be home at this point. She doesn't want to do the family. Like, she doesn't want to do the family. She doesn't want to support the family. She's at home. She is chilling. And another thing that reinforced the housewife dress, which we all know, is this is when wash and wear fabrics become invented. In the early 50s, we have wash and wear, which now I don't have to do that much laundry, right? We have new fabrics. So now these catalogs are coming out that offers so many different house dresses. So I can go buy this house dress. Now I have leisure time. I can go shopping. I can buy all these dresses because it doesn't even take that much for me to wash them anymore. So right after we have these housewives and they have more time on their hand, another thing that happens is people just have more time to be leisure, which means resort wear now is a thing. Resort wear becomes a thing, and a thing in the fact of it's now a fashion statement. Right? Before you may go to the beach, which you're just like, yeah, whatever, you know. But now we have this resort wear for these leisure activities. So we have middle class being able to go to the beach. It's not just the wealthy anymore. They had resort wear, yeah, sure, whatever. But the rest of us did not. The rest of the middle class did not. So now the middle class has more time. We need to start creating resort wear for them. And this is when you start to see the classic 50s style bathing suits, how dressy they were, the loud prints, the fun of it, which is another thing. Anytime we see optimism in the world, it's going to be directly reflected by how people dress. They're going to dress with more color, which is why recently within, I think around last year, people started talking about capsule collections again and how to create a capsule wardrobe. And everybody who like studies fashion was like, oh, okay, recession's on the way. Because that color blocking time is optimism. That when you see people have a lot of color and you see people dressing really fun, the world is in a very optimistic place. And that's where it was at when we had resort wear. All of these things support each other, which is why fashion is so, I always say fashion is indicative of the world. It really is. It truly is. Fashion is here to support and solve the problems that generations are going through, especially when you look back over the decades of the change that was happening. So for men, now men aren't at war anymore. They're not at war. They're not rationing. Everybody's chilling. This is when we start to see men become casual dressy. This gray was a really big thing back then. So for men, what you start to see is double-breasted jacket, wide leg trousers. That's the 50s. You have gray pinstripes, right? So then we move on to something else that was really popular within the 50s, which is going to be teddy boys and hipsters. So anytime we think teddy boy and hipsters, let's think black culture with bebop and jazz. Let's think zoot suits, because that's essentially what that is. It's the same thing. So if you don't know what a zoot suit is, it is a high-waisted baggy pants that then come tapering down into a narrow leg opening with a narrow cuff is a better way to say that, with a long jacket, wide lapel, big shoulders. That's what a zoot suit is. And like I said, African Americans, we were wearing those in the late 30s. And then you move forward, and you have this DJ that makes rock and roll mainstream for everybody now. So that's what we think of when we think about these Teddy Boys and we think about hipsters. Think about the jazz zoot suit. And of course, when we get to the youth, I hate to call out Grease again because it's my favorite movie, but Grease and Hairspray, those are the two best examples. The fashion, let's think about James Dean. James Dean was a fashion icon at that time. So he was the youth. And then this is also when we start to see, now we have these teenagers, right? This is also when we start to see like the high school girl uniform, like those trends that come out through the youth. So, but they all go back to the new look by Dior, which is why that show was so important. If you are a fashion doll, you know, and if you are not, that's completely okay. But there is a picture that we all know from the Dior new look. And Charles James was also really important during this time. His name gets lost a lot within the 50s because he was U.S. He's a U.S. designer. But Charles James also is very important to this. But it goes back to these tiny waist, full skirt. Anytime we think of the 50s, anytime you know you're in the 50s and you're at a high school, the one outfit you know that you will see is a button-up t-shirt, a full skirt, socks that are scrunched down, and probably some Mary Janes. And she has her hair in a ponytail. That was the signature uniform of high school girls at that time. This is also when Wrangler comes out. I think their first collection was for a rodeo, from what I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. But the youth in this time was important. And I keep on emphasizing this because this is when we see the teenage market be created. It was in the 50s. Like I said, they just got out of war. They're at home now. They're chilling. They have all of this extra time. And they start to create things to do. They start to be like, you know what? I kind of want to look like this. I kind of want to do this. I'm getting inspired, blah, blah, blah. This is when that teenage world starts to come out. Because before then, there was not really a market for teenagers. I know there wasn't. I don't think there wasn't. There was kids and then there was adults. A teenager? No. No, that is a new term. If you weren't a kid, you were an adult and you were at work. But the war is over. The war is over. We won. Let's chill. Let's relax. Let's have some leisure. So another thing that happened during this time, we also talked about sports. This is also when you start to see the rise of sports. We have Lycra plus Tom, which means an expansion. And just to go over, so those are pretty much your the design decode of the 50s and how you know that you're looking at the 50s or you're inspired by the 50s. That is that look. And then just some fashion icons that you could look up if you want to know more. Of course, we have JFK, we have Jackie, we have James Dean, and we have Princess Margaret. And of course, Audrey Hepburn, because she's just iconic throughout the years. But that is your design decode for the 50s. And that's also the end of our episode. So thank you guys so much for coming. I really hope you enjoyed that. I enjoyed talking about it. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. And I will see you next week for the 60s. Alrighty, toodles. Have a great day designing.